Today, we will be discussing resource mobilization, and hence not a thematic topic, but an operational one, and one that we have heard from a number of GEO work program activities that is a crucial need and enabler for the scaling of your efforts and work. Before we proceed further, I'm just going to briefly introduce you to Olivia Simmons, who has been working with the GEO Secretariat since August last year, and has been working really hard to understand the needs, the challenges, and the perspectives of the GEO work program activities as it relates to resource mobilization. Many of you may recall the one-on-one interviews that Olivia undertook with many of the GEO work program activities. And that served as the basis for this work that you're going to hear about in much more detail in this workshop. She works under the supervision of Nicoletta Panta, who you can also see, who is the chief of our fundraising and partnerships team. Now, before we get into the meat of things, I just want to also provide you a little bit of feedback that this toolkit has been developed not only with the one-on-one conversations with the GEO work program activities, but also conversations with the program board, the engagement team of the program boards, of which there are some representatives also connected, and also XCOM that in March endorsed the development of this toolkit and related activities. So this is the overall background. The aim of the toolkit will be to provide practical support and guidance in mobilizing necessary resources for the GEO work program activities. It is essentially something that the GEO work program activities will use themselves directly to undertake their resource mobilization efforts. So something that is meant for the work program activities has to be co-designed with the work program activities. And hence, this is the point of this workshop, to kick off this co-design process. And we strongly believe that your active engagement in this early stage is going to be crucial towards creating a product that is useful. The product will, of course, be a living document. It will be iterated upon based on its use cases, its use experiences. So we look forward to your support and engagement, not only in the design phase, but as you implement it and how you rank the utility of this toolkit. So today's workshop is going to be structured into 3 parts. In the first, you're going to get an introduction to the toolkit by Olivia. And the next, we will have an interactive session utilizing the Miro board. And if I can ask my colleague Christy to drop in the link in the chat, so you can already start getting your access into the Miro board, that would be perfect. And then we're going to go into a more open discussion where you can raise any other points in relation to resource mobilization, maybe not directly linked to the toolkit. So around 15 minutes have been set for that. And the interactive session will be 45 minutes or so. We're going to be using Zoom polls. We're going to be using the Miro board. And I will ask you to please not use the Zoom chat, because we'd like to keep all the content of this conversation in the Miro board so that Olivia has access to it afterwards. With that, I'm going to hand over to Olivia. Please do actively participate. We intend to keep you engaged with us on this journey over the course of the next month. So we look forward to your active engagement today and going forward as well. With that, I hand it over to you, Olivia. Please.
Thanks, Madeha. That was a really great introduction, probably better than my presentation will be. But thank you very much, very kind words. And it's really encouraging to see so many familiar names popping up on the screen. I've met many of you before, and some of you, this is the first time. So as Madeha said, I've been a resource mobilization consultant with GEO for quite a few months, since August last year. And I was working on putting together sort of an activity plan and a work plan for resource mobilisation. And this has been one of the key activities that's come out of that's had endorsement of the XCOM, but we'll talk about that in a minute. My background is resource mobilisation for humanitarian development and research. So I've worked with universities and UN agencies, non-government organisations and private sector as well to do business development and resource mobilisation. And it's quite exciting to be with GEO and to be with GEO at this time and to work with such a diverse group of people who are working on quite a diverse group of topics. And so it's been quite a challenge actually for resource mobilisation when there's so many different activities and topics happening. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you all today. This, I think, is one of the most important engagements I'm going to have with people is because you, the users, really have the opportunity to share and talk and feed into the process and shape what the toolkit will be. And I feel like we've done a little bit of that through consultations previously, but I feel like this is one of the most important and exciting engagements for me to hear from you. So I look forward to everyone participating as fully as you can. And you know, I hope we can have some open discussions, but also I hope you use the Miro board as well as you can to pop ideas in there as well. I'll just launch now into share my screen and we'll start the presentation side of things. So, okay, so I've got that up here. All right. So that's the title slide. I think we've covered that already. The purpose of the workshop is really to present the evolution of the toolkit, which we've summarised a little bit there, to test and validate the toolkit design, and also understand the specific user needs. So we're talking to all of you about what you want to see in the toolkit moving forward. The toolkit evolution up until now has been, I came on board August 22. We had those stakeholder consultations at the end of last year. We gave an XCOM update in October last year on our findings, which we'll go through in this presentation at a high level. We also had our resource mobilisation activities approved by the XCOM in March this year, and one of which major pieces is this toolkit that we're talking about today. And in April, just last month, we had a workshop with the engagement team to get their thoughts and feedbacks of the program board there. At a very high level, we did some analysis of the GEO work program funding, looking at the implementation plans. Specifically focused on 2023 to 2025, we found that there is the type of funding tends to be research and development, that discovery side of things, and there's a small amount that tends to be around rollout and implementation. And we found the source of funding to be largely government, which I don't think is any great surprise. 9% of funding from philanthropic foundations, and then there were research institutions and corporates amongst those as well, but much smaller percentage there. And just noting as well, you'd all know this is all self-reported, so it's not necessarily 100% accurate, but it's the data that we have to have a look at. What we can garner from the funding state is that there is a focus on research and development in the funding, but there's also a strong appetite in the work program when I talk to people about implementation and furthering the impact of what they've developed and discovered. The donor base, given that it's largely government, is not diverse, and therefore that poses quite a risk, I think. If one or two donors pull out of funding, then the work program activity is at risk of not being able to operate. Relationships tend to be the key to funding. So a lot of the work program activities talked about having a connection with a person in a government agency, and that's their person they lobby and advocate to for funding. Funding has geographical links. So we're looking at, obviously, if an activity is being undertaken, particularly in one country, the funding tends to come from that country. In the reported data, we had China reporting, you know, a significant amount of money being spent in China on work program activities there. The lack of legal status of the work program activities really does reduce the eligibility for open grant calls. So that makes it quite a tricky position to be in to attract funding. And funding appetites vary across the work program. I was told by some work program activities that they don't need any more funding, or they're happy with maintaining the level that they have. And also noting the various stages of the work program activities. So there is from pilot to flagship. So, you know, that can reflect research and development and discovery funding versus implementation and rollout, but also the size of funding and the position they are to attract funding. Obviously, there's different donors that are interested in funding more pilot work as opposed to rollout. Through the stakeholder consultations, there was quite a few challenges that were raised, and I've sort of highlighted some of the main themes that came through here. So there was about 6 or 7. Now, obviously, I don't think there's going to be any great surprise that funding for the organisation, for the secretariat and staff, was really the most difficult to attract. And groups found that without that money for secretariat or convening, they didn't have the room to come up with those great project ideas that were going to be able to attract additional funding or real, quite significant funding for them to be able to implement and operate. There was limited capacity and ability to raise and manage funding, and that was looking at, you know, the GEO work program activities. You all know you wear many hats, and to have that room and that space to spend focused on finding donors, engaging, writing compelling projects and reporting, and you know, finding that time is difficult, especially if it's not in your wheelhouse, and especially if you're not sort of set up as a legal entity to operate in that way. It can be quite tricky. A key part of being able to attract funding was measuring and demonstrating outcomes and impact, and that came through as a theme that I felt, you know, especially looking at the secretariat and the operating and the organising, there was outcomes and impact from that people weren't able to talk about to satisfy, I guess, a donor's appetite for investment. Funding is short term. It's really difficult to secure a multi-year agreement. So, you know, that leaves people in quite a precarious situation year to year. Finding the right donors and engaging with those donors was an issue, and making a really compelling case for funding in such a crowded space was something that came out as well as quite difficult. So I'm going to actually hand over now. Christy is going to launch a very brief Zoom poll that I'd like everyone to take some time now to fill out. Now, the purpose of this Zoom call isn't necessarily to get sort of hard data, but it's really to prepare us, I guess, for thinking about the next phase of this presentation, which is the Miro board, where I want people to be thinking about their own position of looking for funding and looking for funding for the work program, what some of the challenges might be, and where you're set up, I guess, for attracting funding or not as a work program. So this is going to give me some high-level indication of where this group is at, and where, you know, I might need to guide the toolkit more so. So I'm going to give everyone probably another minute to try to fill that out, and then we might close that off and have a quick look at the findings. Yeah, there's 9 questions there, so I think.
So basically, Olivia, you are, you know, you're taking some of those findings that you had from the stakeholder consultations, and you're using that to kind of validate from this group through this poll.
Yes, yeah, 100%. So these were some of the themes that came through stakeholder consultations and, you know, discussions with people that I've met. yeah, to validate those, but to get us really thinking now what some of your own individual challenges might be. And I think being able to reflect on that now, and we can sort of be more specific when we move to the Miro board as well.
Absolutely.
So I'll give everyone another few seconds now. I don't know if Christy can see.
We do recognize that, you know, some of this is self-assessment. So how you assess whether you have a strong vision, mission, or plan may be different from expectations from the donor side. So I guess those are some of the things that we will need to dig deeper into, Olivia, right, in the next discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got Used on the call now talking about impact. You know, what is impact? How do you demonstrate impact is a big piece to unpack that we're not going to get to now. But, you know, you have a sense whether you can talk about some of the data or not on what you're doing. Can you talk about that as a secretariat?
Yeah.
As well, or as an organising, as a group, and your convening activities, some of the outputs and outcomes from those, in addition to what you're doing at a project level.
Exactly. And we have a question in the chat. I see Paula has asked whether with your work program, we're referring to our implementation plans. Indeed, I will confirm, Paula, that is the case. And in many ways, I'm actually glad, because we will be having the next coordination workshop on capacity development, where Used, who's also connected on this call, is going to be supporting creating a toolkit that will involve thinking through the results chain, thinking about a theory of change, et cetera. So both very complementary conversations, but that's for a little later. Olivia, I wonder if we have, if we're good to go with showing the results now.
Yeah, Christy, could you close that off and share? Okay, great. Thank you very much. So I don't know, can everybody see these pop up for them? Yeah, great. Okay, so talking about work program having a track record of attracting funding, it's fairly even split, which I'm quite surprised. So that's a really good piece of information to have, that there's a lot out there that haven't had that experience of attracting funding for their work program. And it'll be interesting to know, you know, if something has been tried and failed, or if there's what kind of barriers there are to attracting that funding. Does your work program have the time and resources to fundraise? No, yeah, that's not surprising at all. So looking at how we can create this toolkit to really be very efficient and targeted for GEO. A lot of the, you know, UN agencies and different groups have their own guidebooks and toolkits that are just so targeted that it takes out a lot of the thinking or the time involved in finding new donors and finding resources to be able to do things. Does your work program have a strong mission, vision, and plan? Well, that's fantastic. I mean, that's the founding point. And if you say yes, that means you are able to talk about your vision, mission, and plan, which is, you know, half the battle. So does your work program monitor and report on outputs and outcomes as a secretarial group? Yeah, fantastic. 86%. That's a great result. And can your work program demonstrate the impact of your activities? 86%. I mean, that's a fantastic result as well. So they're key pieces of information to demonstrate to a donor track record, but also demonstrate to a donor how you're going to record and demonstrate your impact moving forward, because that's what they're buying, is the outcomes and the impact. Can your work program apply for funding on its own or with a close partner? 79% say yes, which is fantastic, because, you know, the work program activities not having a legal registration, you know, can be an issue. So applying through partners or having a pathway to apply is, you know, obviously essential. Does your work program have project ideas in need of funding? Yes, you know, that's fantastic as well. 93% was it? And does your work program have a budget for the costs? No, 71%. That's something we need to work on, because costing those out and knowing what your activities are means that you have a proper project plan that can be funded, that is then presented to a donor that is low risk. And 71% of people say that they have links with potential funders, current and potential funders, which is great. So thank you. That's really, really helpful information for me, and I think can take us into the next part where we start talking more concretely about the toolkit. So I'll share my screen again. Move along. There we go. Okay. So the resource mobilisation toolkit, it is a simple and targeted resource with practical tools to support identifying, securing and managing new funds and resources. Who's it for? It's designed as a resource to build the capacity of the GEO work program, and it's currently in development, and Q3 we're expecting it to be available for people to use. And as Medea said, it's something that hopefully we will get people's feedback. We don't want this to be a static document. We want it to be improved upon by people, not just sharing what their challenges are, but sharing what tools worked for them and what systems worked for them, positive case studies that we can use in the document as well. It'll really keep it live and will help enhance the capacity of the rest of the work program activities as well moving forward. Like I said previously, like a resource mobilisation guide or a toolkit is a pretty common document that's had by many multilateral agencies, non-government organisations, universities, and it's their plan for funding, but also a how-to, because you know that they don't have the resources to have a huge team doing all of that work, and it's not the way it works either. Donors really want to engage with technical people who know what they're talking about, who are able to talk on a technical level, because the donors themselves have those technical staff as well. So having this tool that enables you to be able to engage and find funders and write compelling proposals will be, I think, the first step in increasing the funding for the activities that are undertaken through GEO. So through discussions up to this point, these are the core sections of the toolkit that I'm thinking fit with GEO. So this is the part where I really want to validate what I'm thinking and where the toolkit is heading. And we're going to do that through an interactive session next, but I'll just highlight the sections at a high-level summary, and then we're going to go into the Miro board activity, which I'll explain in a second. But the sections we're looking at is an introduction to resource mobilisation. So this is talking about what are the resources, what kind of donors give what kind of resources, and what are some of the typical, I guess, concepts for resource mobilisation and business development that are used. In the second section, we wanted to look at preparing to mobilise and receive funding, and this is the internal look at the GEO work program. This is your vision, your mission. This is your accepting and managing funding. This is knowing about yourself and getting your house in order. Section 3 is about identifying and engaging with donors, and that can be quite a difficult process as well, with so many donors out there, and to understand which ones are working in those particular areas that you're working in terms of your topic, but your subtopic, your speciality, your niche, your geographical area, and then how to engage with those donors is another step as well. Looking at requesting funding is section 4, and so that is looking at requesting funding can happen in many different ways. So we're going to unpack that. This is probably going to be one of the most important sections, but it's looking at inside of grant rounds, outside of grant rounds, advocating and lobbying for funding, creating a pitch, but understanding your competitive advantage and your unique value add, and making a really compelling argument and case for your cause, for the gap that you're addressing through this requesting funding. But how to write a compelling and clear proposal is another aspect as well, because many donors speak, you know, a different language to the language we might be talking, quite a technical language, but they want to speak quite a business or a programmatic language. So some of those tools around proposal writing. And the last one is managing and increasing funding, because the donors you have are the most valuable donors. They're the most likely to give again and to keep giving. So managing those donors and reporting to those donors and is hugely important. So understanding what they want, what their objectives are in terms of the projects that you're doing, but also they've got objectives around communications and branding as well that we have to respect if we want to increase that funding into the future as well. So we're going to go into the mirror board activity now, and I'd just like to ask if everybody is, set my screen up over here. So I'll just make sure you can all, if everyone can still see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen. It's on Doodle right now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'm just going to hand over then to, I'll stop sharing quickly and I'll hand over to Christy to give us an introduction of the Miro board. I can just try to...
Everyone has access to the link, I presume. It should be up on the chat. If you don't, we can reshare it. Christy, are you there?
I think you're muted, Christy.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So I suppose you can also see my screen. As Olivia said, we will be using Miro in this workshop. Miro is a collaborative whiteboard. And as you can see, the board is split into different sections, and every board, the gray boards, they correspond to a section. To participate, we kindly invite you to use one of these sticky notes here. I'm not sure if you can see them, and if you can just to start writing, you can just double click. Sorry, you can just double click and simply start typing, and then when you're done, you can just drag them to the board, and that's about it. Over to you, Olivia.
Thank you very much. So during this session of the Miro board, we're not going to abandon you. We are going to, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to have basically a slide on each of the sections that we can talk through. And I really encourage people to talk while we're doing this, and I'm going to ask a few questions as we go. But please, yeah, share your thoughts in the Miro board as we go. But the Miro board's split up into 6 sections. And so those sections are the 5 resource mobilization toolkit sections and an other, because I don't want to miss anything or any valuable feedback or any good ideas by limiting it to those sections. So I'd first ask, we're going to spend about 5 minutes on each section. So I will talk through each of the sections and ask a few questions, and really encourage people who want to share, you know, put your camera on and chat while people are in the Miro board adding bits and pieces. So the intro to resource mobilization section will be section 1. It makes a lot of sense that it would be at the beginning. and we're going to cover some of those key concepts of resource mobilisation and business development. We want to have a quick look at sort of trends and opportunities, but considering that that is so well documented outside of GEO, the toolkit's going to lean quite heavily on some of the tools and information that's already available, because we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to be lean and efficient and use what's out there. So, but we do want to have a look at trends and opportunities for funding for the work we do. And we want to have a quick overview of making resource mobilisation plans for our work. You know, you can make them at the time of the implementation plans or as annual plans, but really identifying those resource mobilisation goals and moving towards those. For resource mobilisation, I mean, you know, for some people, it's fundraising, it's business development. You know, resource mobilisation is about attracting various resources. And GEO's got a great history of attracting in-kind support of products and services. People always talk about cloud credits programs. But, you know, also people have a lot of questions around this, like what kind of donors give what kind of resources? What resources can I get? So, you know, those kind of challenges, but also any kind of positive experiences as well that you have. I'd encourage you to share on the Miro board or to talk about now. Like, you know, do you have any issues or questions that you want to raise in the discussion now? No, I can see some points coming up on the Miro board. Maybe we can talk to some of those.
And we did.
I don't know. Yes, sorry.
Sorry, we did have some reflections on the chat from Amos, who is now gone. But if Anche is around, maybe she could also speak to some of those points. Sorry, Olivia, for interrupting.
That's good.
Yes, I'm around. I just have to see what. Yeah, he's wondering. So at the for GEO LDN, for example, we have one big donor, which is the German government. We are looking into a sustainability strategy, how to sustain funding, how to sustain the secretariat even after this project-based funding is gone. And as GEO LDN is based on a decision by the UNCCD Conference of the Parties, there are all the UNCCD parties who agreed or who are asking GEO LDN for many things. So potentially also those parties are potential donors, but it's not easy to get funding from donors of different countries if you're not very close there. So this is the one thing, but the other thing that Amos is raising is, so what other options do we have? So private sector funding, for example. And I think what he's also implicitly meaning there is, since he said most of GEO work is voluntary based, it's really, for many, it's voluntary based to a level that's becoming unhealthy. There are so many people who, you know, working day and night besides their day job. So I think this is also something to be considered, is like, yeah, especially if you work in a context where the salary doesn't, you know, allow you to work part-time or whatever. I think this is really also a risk and something to consider, how to give benefit to some of those who are dedicating a lot of work into GEO.
Yeah, they're really valuable points. And when you do have countries supporting the work verbally in a lot of ways, but not putting up funding, can be really challenging. And, you know, looking to other areas as well is really important. Private sector, foundation funding, there's a significant increase of foundation funding in this space in the last few years as well, and it's securing that funding for staff to relieve some of the pressure that's put on the work program to do administrative tasks or project tasks and things like that. I think is really important. Being able to sell that and package that up for a donor and convince them of the importance of that is key.
Right, and there is a comment in the chat from Theory. Theory, if you're connected and able to speak, please do.
Yes, I am. Sorry, I was late, so I missed the first presentation. On the question of in fact, my thinking was about the type of donors we are talking about, and in my view, there are three categories: donors, so people given money in a project because they find an interest on it, not a private interest or something very special because they want to sustain the subject or the area of interest. Versus the funding in a project when you answer to a call for proposal, or even private sector funding when they are asking for a specific project, service, support for their own benefits, in fact. So that's the three main activity I see. I don't know if it's of importance for the discussion here, but my question was more on which one we are focusing now on this exercise of the Miro board.
Yes, so that's a good question. Really focused on philanthropic funding. So, well, philanthropic, or your last description was a private sector having their own interests involved, and the private sector gives money in different ways, and there are corporate foundations that give philanthropy, but there's also funding and contracts and partnerships from the private sector as well. This isn't focused on a partnership model with the private sector. This is focused on funding and resources that are essentially donated from the private sector. But you're very much focused on government funding, international philanthropy, that's foundations, and majority of those foundations were, related to a corporate entity as well initially, and maybe have moved on. You've got Gates, you've got all these big ones that sort of aren't so closely related to the corporate side of things anymore, that are more just philanthropic organisations. But you've also got some small private sectors that do have philanthropic initiatives, but it's not that partnership where there's a contract, where there is intellectual property discussed. There's, for resource mobilisation purposes, we're talking about more of a donation. If that answers your question, Terry.
It's clarify at least on which topic we should work. I think it's not the two last one, but the idea is really around some structure that are really focusing on the funding that came from private company or for government because they have an interest in the topic, of course. But with the idea that it's not sure that there will be an operational service at the end. We are working on the idea of making the knowledge grow, or the tools, a series of tools that becomes to be available, or to explore the knowledge. That's what I understand from your answer. It's not, let's say, to have a system that it's not we are not focusing on an operational service for a dedicated application here, which is because then you enter the question of the PI, the intellectual properties, and the capacity to use and to sell the activity, which is a bit different.
Yeah.
So that That's my point. I just want to be sure that we are on the same page to
Yes.
understand what we are thinking about. Okay.
Right, we have, thanks, Theory. We have a hand raised from Justina and Olivia, lots of action on the Miro board.
Fantastic.
I've also copy pasted, Theory, your comment onto the Miro board. But Justina, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you both. So I am just actually curious from the initiatives participating in activities, what are some of your top limiting factors? I see some comments about that, but I think it's really good to know like where you have experienced obstacles, potentially in roadblocks. I saw one comment there about the legal status of GEO, and that may be one, but I'm just thinking in terms of ways that you can qualify for philanthropic funding and other funding, like what are some of, if people are applying and having issues, are there any particular factors we need to think about and address as we look at some of these criteria for and a toolkit for resource mobilization? So I don't know if that's the right category that we're in on Miro board, but I'd be just curious to hear perspectives on those experiences. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
If anyone wants to comment or go straight into the Miro board and put your thoughts down there, that'd be great. We might be able to move on to the next section as well. And Justina, yeah, there's definitely room for answering those questions throughout the next sections. If I try to move, there we go. Okay. So the next section on the Miro board is about preparing to mobilize resources and receive funding. And that's the point. Yeah, so we can scroll across the Miro board and see that. But that's really the internal looking section where we look at, okay, organizationally, do we have that vision, mission, goals, and plans? That's quite firm. That's what a donor will really look to see, to know where you're heading and how the activity you're requesting funding for feeds into your direction and your longer term impact. Do you have a capacity statement about who you are and what you can do and what you're made up of, to be able to clearly tell any kind of donor, we are this, we are unique for this purpose, and we're created, we're comprised of these skills, and we use those skills for this, and there is no one else like us. And a track record of achievement. You know, you talked about in the Zoom poll being able to demonstrate those outcomes and impact. Do you have those quantifiable, figures around what you've done available and accessible to say, you know, invest in us. This is what we've done in the last 12 months. This is what we did with our last project funding. This is how we work, and therefore this is what we can do for you moving forward. Operationally, the ability to receive and manage funding, we mentioned already before, and there was a really positive response in the Zoom poll. So I'm really keen for you to tell me in here, how do you receive and manage funding? Who's signing contracts? Do you have a partnership? Who's your partnership with? Is it because your work program has someone that, you know, that works for a different institution, that they then therefore receive and manage the funding on the work program activities behalf? Compliance and due diligence with partner requirements. I mean, that's another point operationally as well, how you're able to do that. But I'm really keen to hear not just your challenges, but, you know, do you have these things? Do you feel like you're set up? What do you think you need to be more set up? Or what do you think is more of interest to donors that you've engaged with, having any of these things in your wheelhouse? Would be really interesting, because, you know, there was such a positive response in the Zoom poll of people saying, yeah, we're ready for funding. We've got a vision and mission, and we've got capacity statements. So what have you found donors have responded to well, and what have you found that you needed to lift your game a little bit in? Or what have been the biggest challenges internally to organise yourself to get ready to get funding, or to actually to logistically receive and manage that funding.
Wonderful. So we drop it in the Miro board, but we've got a couple of, quite a few, more than a couple of activities connected. So if it's okay, I'm just gonna speak out some names, and if you're willing and interested to respond to these questions, please do open up, unmute yourself, and have at it. So we've got Aqua Watch, we've got GSNL, got Digital Earth Africa. Would any of you like to step in and reflect on these questions, while others can obviously go directly in to the Miro board?
So this is Mary Beth from GEO Aqua Watch. Regarding the who signs your contracts, I did put a comment on the Miro board. Previously, we had a director who was legally able to sign the contract. We have a fiscal sponsor, and so the little bit of funding that we have received, our previous director was able to sign. Our current director is based at a different location and is legally unable to sign the contract. So we've had to pivot and open that up to sign by our steering committee chair, which is fine. It just takes a lot longer to execute. So I think that's been a bit of a logistical struggle for us. You know, a lot of time funding comes with very quick turnaround timeframes. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And by location, do you mean a different institution?
Yes. So
Yeah.
we moved from a US based institution to, which is in the same country as our fiscal sponsor, to a Netherlands based, and they are not able to legally sign documents in the Netherlands on behalf, like there's some legal separation between an entity signing on behalf of an entity as a director, that prevents that from being legal. So
yeah, that is really challenging, and those contracts do require a relatively fast turnaround from donors usually. How long are you finding it takes now?
well, we of course convene our steering committee by email in that case, and so to get the signed signature, if everybody is responsive in an email, could happen within a week. But yeah, it's really at the comfort level of whoever the steering committee chair is as to whether or not they've had time to review the document that they're signing, if they have any questions and or agree to it, and then turn that back around. So if everything's clean, it could happen very quickly. But if there's any sort of you know, like what does this clause mean, any back and forth, then that extends it.
Yeah, that's tricky, and it's coming through on the Miro board as well, the legal registration, and having you know, linked foundations and fiscal sponsors as well. Another point here is coming through is the human resources to manage the funding, audits and reporting is really important as well, and being able to budget that into the activities that you're getting funding for is the key, but it is difficult to do.
Do any other work program activities want to speak up and share their experience? I also see GEO Mountains. James?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think from our perspective, I think we're very reliant on one single funder. So this is obviously something which we need to consider going forward, really, as a priority. And yeah, of course, I think that we found definitely the reporting requirements can often be quite onerous as well, and sort of trying to find this balance between actually doing the work and then also reporting on it to satisfy the funder can be quite tricky sometimes. But yeah, we're just very grateful for GEO for setting up hopefully this process, which will hopefully also enable us to do this more efficiently going forwards.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, James. Anchi has got her hand up.
Yes, actually, it's very similar. It's this one that Olivia just read out was from me. Just preparing for the funding took us, I think, 1.5 years until we got the funding. And now, why we have this funding for 5 years? It's so we have a finance manager, office manager, overall program management, and then the people who are doing the work on stakeholder engagement, capacity development, and Earth observations. So it's taking so the administrative overhead is quite large. Just and I don't know, since every funder needs something else, I think it will probably be difficult to have a joint approach for all GEO activities on this, because everyone has to satisfy their own donor. But this is really something that's consuming quite a lot of resources. And within GEO LDN, in the middle of the way, we were really thinking we were faster in implementing activities when we didn't apply for the funding. So we had sort of 1 year almost pause of activities because this applying for the funding took so long. So this is really has to be considered how much human resources, time and energy goes into this. And if this resource mobilization can be as a joint activity, I think everyone would really greatly benefit from this. Then the reporting and auditing, probably everyone would have to do themselves. But if this mobilization phase, in the other Miro, I put one idea, for example, so if we have some common ideas like building up regional help desks or certain capacity development or stakeholder engagement activities, long-term activities that are similar in the work programs, then maybe GEO Secretariat could also facilitate joint fundraising for several of the activities. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, that's well noted, but it's a constant struggle, and it's something that we need to be able to feed back to the donors as well. So capturing that information and saying that you've lost a year of implementation time because of the administration should be something that should shock a donor into change. But, you know, the discussions with donors and good donor principles and things like that have been ongoing, and, you know, it's an ongoing problem. I agree that the approach for a kind of a consortia can work if there's a big program and donors agree to all feed into one, then they'll quite often agree to one report from that. But other than that approach, it can be a bit difficult to get donors to agree to different reporting styles. But they're interesting suggestions, and I think ones that we need to consider moving forward, and when we talk about how we support the work program and GEO to fundraise and how we can do things more efficiently and effectively. So thank you very much for the suggestions.
Yeah, so when you get the money, you have a whole different set of problems, and you better budget for those, I guess, is the lesson learned from the LDN experience. And by the way, Anche, the joint funding is actually something what we're trying to do through the post-2025 incubators, like create these large programmatic efforts that bring together different activities and fundraise for those large ambitious programs that will benefit a number of activities as opposed to individual, is the intention behind that. So we'll definitely need to continue to scale those.
Yes, thank you. I think that's helpful. It's well, for the post 2025. I think then it's crucial also to see that this will leverage on what's really what the work program activities are doing, and not having additional activities that they would have to contribute their voluntary time to. I think that's something to consider as well.
Absolutely not voluntary time. I think everyone's maxed out. That message is coming out loud and clear. Olivia.
Yeah, that's great. There's so much great activity going on here, and you could stay here for a while, but we'd better jump on because we've got to cover the rest of the sections. So if I move on to the section 3, which was identifying and engaging donors. And in this section, we really want to share some great online sources and databases because there are resources out there. UN Water just released a report on funders that would be useful for any of the water-related activities. So here we want to sort of collect those resources and make them accessible for everyone. It's really, really difficult. We did try to do a donor map, and we do have, a picture of where sort of some of the donors might be, but because of the diversity of the work program, to do that at a higher scale is really difficult. So sharing the sources and databases that are a little bit more targeted, and that UN Water one is actually a really good resource that looks at government funding and specifically what areas they're operating to do with water. So I think that will be useful, and there should be some other ones as well. There's one being launched on biodiversity in June, a donor sort of map and resource. So we'll include all of those in here, and hopefully it will be a place for everyone to sort of go and identify particular donors that they can engage with, but also really encourage anyone who knows of any sources and databases that would be relevant for this section to share them as well. And then it's a process of, okay, you've got a list of donors, how do you match them? Who's really good for you? So creating that set of criteria for the work you're doing to match up with that particular donor and the way they operate and how they fund. Understanding and aligning with donors' priorities is obviously very key because really, many donors see their funding coming through as, they're funding service providers to help them achieve their objectives. And we need to prove to them that we are low risk, and how we can help them meet their objectives is the way it's approached typically. We want to look at the methods of partnership. So we talked about, whether we go in as a lead applicant, or maybe we're a partner on a proposal or in a consortia. We want to look at building relationships in this section and how to go about that. And we want to look at communications, and that's something that, I think the communications team are developing resources in the, as part of the work, the activities for the next year or so around branding and things like that. So they're the kind of things that we will link to, and that's where this is an iterative document, and we can link to the capacity development toolkit. We can link to the communications resources around GEO to make this a really efficient and effective toolkit where you can go and find the resources you need. But yeah, so moving along in the Miro board, I can see there's still so much activity on the other one, which is fantastic. I think this is an interesting one for people to find out, who are those donors and how to align with their priorities. But I'd encourage anyone who wants to talk quickly now about any of their experiences, challenges, or any tips that they've found really useful that they want to share.
We do have Digital Earth Africa also present. So if we could potentially kick off with the reflections from that team. Vico, I see you're online. If you're able to speak, please do. Otherwise, we do also have GeoLam. Hello, I see you.
Hi, I was hoping there was another team member on the call, but I guess you're pointing the finger at me. So I'm the head of operations for Digital Earth Africa. So our experience has been quite a little bit different, I think, for many of the organizations here. Digital Earth Africa has been around for about 4 years, but it was actually founded out of Geoscience of Australia. And so the Geoscience Australia team, they really have put together a lot of the kind of framework of how we're working and mobilizing resources. So we've been pretty fortunate in that. And one of the opportunities, one of the things that has worked really well for us, because we didn't all have the skill set or the time to look and identify potential funders, is we actually outsourced the process of looking for fundraising. And so there were experts that we engaged with. They put together a list of potential partners, and then we, based on our needs and based on our work program and goals as well, to see where their alignment is. And we've used that to kind of build a funnel and build a pipeline that we then work towards. So that, I mean, it didn't come, it wasn't inexpensive, but it has allowed the team to really kind of focus on the day-to-day work program. And then we have specialists who really have helped us drive the pipeline. And then now the day-to-day team is then able to engage and actually deliver on that pipeline. So that's kind of the process that we use from a funding perspective, which has worked well for us.
Can I ask, that was really great. Can I ask, how do you engage with prospective donors?
So for each donor, we kind of note what the opportunity is. So it might be that it's a network outreach that we need to do through like people we know. Sometimes it's actually through just a call for proposals. So we classify each donor based on that, and then we then kind of put together a plan of how we're going to actually engage with each one. So, for example, one we're trying to engage with is actually the Green Climate Fund. And with the Green Climate Fund, there isn't really an easy way to get to them. And it's a long process of actually registering with the Green Climate Fund. So we know that one of our partners actually is registered with the Green Climate Fund. And so our opportunity to actually is to work closely with the partner to submit an application through them. So we almost tailor the approach based on based on where the actual potential funder, like what their needs are, how we're connected to them. We've tried to map it up as best we can so that we're actually able to engage with them thereafter.
Yeah, great. And at what point do you say it's not a fit? Have you found there's quite a few that were on your list that you've ruled out now?
Yeah, so actually the company that we outsourced to, they helped us create a funding prioritization criteria. And so before we actually start applying and start doing all of that, we actually make sure that there's a good fit. So, and it goes through like different, and it gives, essentially, it's almost like a Google form that someone has to fill out, and it gives a score at the end. And if it's within the, if the score is high enough, then we'll say that, okay, we're going to approach it and we're going to actually put some effort behind it. But if sometimes like it just doesn't, it's not going to be a good fit, we're not going to actually spend time on it thereafter. So we found like that's a useful way to very quickly just kind of sift through what might be useful and what might not be. I know that's probably, you then also lose some opportunities there, but it can help us just because, I mean, you're doing so much day-to-day work. You don't want to spend a lot of time on something that's just not likely to provide the benefit in the end.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, that's really useful. Thank you very much for sharing your experience.
And we now have Makabe from GeoGlam with her hand raised. So please go ahead, Makabe.
So, hi everyone, I'm Makabe from GeoGlam. So our experience, well, GeoGlam has we depend on yearly funding from some of the G20 countries, which is just a few of them, which is not a lot. And the funding comes from year to year. It's hard to plan way ahead. And now when we also have some in-kind support from most of our partners in terms of data and staff hours to develop most of the products we use. But going forward, what we're looking at is that we develop these products for the public, for countries, but we need the countries to sustain these products going forward and to take them up. And for this, we can't use the financing that we have from for the Secretariat. It's not enough to go into the countries. So we need to find a way to, get more sustainable financing, perhaps from the government. And this is where we would need a lot of help to, do a value proposition for the government so that they can inject their national finance or kind of integrate some of these products into their national development agenda for sustainable financing. So we'll need this support. We also have been trying to get into private finance, so getting foundations and banks, private banks to support. But then again, the issue of legality comes in, and that's a challenge. So we're looking forward to find a workaround. And another, perhaps more of a question rather than a comment. If we do go through, as a Secretariat, GEO and GeoGlam Secretariat, we do not have the legality. If we decide to go through our partners, how would this look? How would it work legally and to manage the finances and all of this? We'd be interested to get your support on this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Makabe. Yeah, it's really, it can be really tricky. I mean, when you're creating a global tool that's being used and it needs to be maintained, I think you're right that it's something outside of a grant call. It'd be something where you need to create a really strong case and advocate for funding and a long-term commitment for where that's owned and housed. So we're looking at how to do that. And funding through partners, is an interesting one as well, because we need to look at there's a certain amount of due diligence you want to do to choose a partner as well, to make sure that it's the right partner that you're working with to access funding, and then logistically how that will work.
Wonderful. I wonder, Olivia, whether we should also call upon Theory to share the eShape experience, the very well-funded eShape experience.
Yeah.
Yes, we can do something around that. But eShape was a specific project because it was a project funded on an open call. So it's a bit different, I think. Mm-hmm. But on the lesson learned on that, we can maybe build on the fact that when we are talking about donors, that's a bit different than what happened in eShape. But for the donors, I think there are a series of questions. I tried to translate them in the Miro activity. When you are developing a business, so the idea is really to build an operational service and to build its sustainability. When talking with donors, the question is why are they coming to you, and what counterparts they are waiting for. Because if they give you some money, they have the idea of something that they are looking for. So it can be your image being the key actor on the domain, your network. It can be many things. In eShape, we didn't have this issue because we were building some operational services with the idea of going to sustainability or business activity. So that was a bit different. It was the aim of my first question on to whom we are speaking. And because in another activity which is not in GEO, we are looking to donors also, but private sectors. We have this question that arises in terms of what is the counterpart. So the fact that they can come to you, the private sector, because they want to have experts trained and well equipped for the future. So there is a part of training on that. They can come to you because you have the knowledge in a domain they want to go on and to explore. They are going to you because they want a partnership with a specific institute or things like that, or because you are the key person in a domain. And that's what we have built with 3 big companies and 2 SMMEs last year from my colleague in our team that built what we can call the professorship, which is not exactly the good term, but is about research and training with big companies like RTE, Somfy, or Total Energy, and with small SMMEs of a dedicated domain of the solar energy that are developing their own business. And so the people are here because they understand that they can have access to students, they can have access to PhD supervisor, they can have access to knowledge, and the creation of the knowledge will be their first interest, because they will have all the information before the other, because it's always you give the prime presentation to them before going outside, and they have in this case a kind of private advantage compared to the other, even if there is no PI on that. So that's the key question, and that's a series of questions I try to have in the Miro. For the thing I'm speaking about, it's mainly with French company. So there is a dedicated tax system, and so they have some also counterpart with tax reduction when they have such a kind of funding like donors. They receive a feedback of 66% of the money they had give to the foundation. So there is so it's closely at no cost that they are funding this. Only 30% of the amount of money they are putting on the table. The counterpart is the fact that they have the ability of having access to a fresh knowledge and a fresh training part, and also I think really that we should. There is a full program defined for 5 years, so they are funding for 5 years the activity through the foundation of our institute. And so if we want to go worldwide, I think there is a need for knowing the different rules for the different donors in the different countries, because I think they are quite different. Of course, it's for sure talking about tax reduction or things like that, but I think it will be interesting to know exactly this kind of information, and the fact that we can develop really a full program starting from the the building of knowledge till the operational development of activity. If we are able also to see what will be the good, let's say, counterpart for each partners in the activity. And for sure, it's not fully. There is some impact on this type of activity because it's really directing the thing you want to do because they want to have a counterpart, of course. My 50 pence.
Thank you so much, Thierry. Olivia, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different kinds of partnerships and arrangements you can have, and that where you do have a company that does have, they're almost receiving a service as well as access to various things. There's more of a, I guess, less there. What we're talking about, it's a bit more removed from what we're talking about, which I think we established. But there are definitely considerations about when you do have funding from an organisation and when there are additional requirements and requests, because you can have philanthropic funding that does have IP and various other services and things that they want from that as well. And understanding and navigating those contracts really requires, an understanding of what you're willing to participate in, and it can be quite tricky. But we're really trying to focus on that. A donor rather than a partner, rather than an organisation that's coming in or a private sector agency that's coming in and expecting a fee for service and access to additional requirements as well through this. But we better jump along because we've been spending a lot of time. So I'll just go to the next one, and we might have to talk through these really quickly so that we leave a bit of time at the end. But this is about requesting funding. So through this, we've touched on this, I think, through a lot of our conversations so far and people's comments, which has been really useful. But being able to articulate your competitive advantage, I mean, it's really a crowded space out there. So how do you make yourself stand out from the crowd, and how do you make your mission and your vision stand out, but also how do you make your unique value add to what you're doing impressive enough to be funded? Getting that funding inside and outside of grant rounds, and I think there's clear delineations for what we're talking about here. Maccabi's talking about sustaining a service that is really difficult to attract funding inside of a grant round, and really lobbying and advocating to the users of that service would be the best approach there. Making a decision to apply or not. And Zvaiko from Digital Earth Africa talked about that decision matrix, or that series of questions where you need to decide, do we go ahead and pursue this donor? Do we go ahead and pursue this call? Because it's a huge investment of time to put together a proposal. And as we've mentioned in the Zoom poll, that time is a real issue for everyone in this circumstance, because we don't have those resource mobilisation or fundraising resources to throw towards putting together calls or proposals or engagements without being really sure that this is a good one. So having a matrix or criteria to decide what's a good donor, but what's a good funding opportunity. And really, it's tough to decide not to go for something that looks good, but it's a really smart decision in the end when you're not going to be competitive, to save your time and put your energy into something that you are going to be competitive for. How to develop your pitch. And that's important because we've talked about how important relationships are, and being able to talk about what you do and talk about your impact and relating it to a donor's objectives is hugely important in a conversational way, because you're going to meet these donors at conferences and in various places outside of specific targeted engagements as well, and being able to have key messages that you can draw on to talk to them about is very important. Developing a solid and a compelling proposal is hugely important. So, you know, how you put together your first page, how do you get a reader from the very beginning hooked and really invested in what you're proposing, and demonstrating a pathway to impact. And that's where I'm going to link to the capacity development work that Eusta's undertaking as well in the toolkit, and how this will be a live document that crosses across the different toolkits and resources in GEO to put together, you know, something where you can draw on all of the expertise across GEO. So having said that, requesting funding, I know we've only got 9 minutes left actually. So do we want to have does anyone have any burning issues that they want to talk about for requesting funding? Because I think this is a key topic and we might be able to save time on the next phase if there's something that people want to add here. Okay, I'm going to take that as a people are busy in the Miro board. So thank you. And we might then just jump across to the next one, which is managing and increasing your funding. So this is where we talked about how important it is, you know, bird in the hand. The donor you have and the donor you know is the most important donor, because they are the ones that are more likely to fund you into the future. So how to manage that relationship well and engage with them to retain them and to grow funding is what this section will sort of go into. Reporting is another key one, but we've talked about how onerous and how difficult it is to undertake some of the admin required from the donors we do have. And that's something I think, you know, that should be fed back to the donors as much as we can and try to work with them to find a simplified way. But in reality, it is a challenge that everybody faces. And I do want to note that we want to link to the communications resources around, you know, the visibility and branding is something that every donor has their own. So we're linking to the resources of that particular donor to make sure that we include their visibility and branding as much as we can. We do talk to them on social media. We talk to them in different ways, and we promote them in different ways as per their guidelines recommend and as they want to be seen. And that's how we position ourselves as a good partner for the donor. And we want to also include our communications resources, so linking to the resources that will be developed as part of the comms team to how we talk and how we promote what we're doing through social media and other sources as well. So I can see there's actually quite a lot of activity going on still on the Miro board as well. The other section is blank. So I might just open it up if that works for everybody. For any other burning issues or points that didn't have a place in this workshop previously, if you have anything you want to raise or talk about or dump in the Miro board or dump on us, now's your chance. Okay. No, it's quiet. Well, that's good because it's 9:30. It's 9:25 here. So if you're quiet, that means I can go to bed soon. But I'll just talk quickly on the next steps. And so in the GEO Symposium, Medea, that's next week, isn't it?
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks. Okay. Well, that buys us some time. We'll give an update on where we're up to, and there's so much rich information coming out of this this workshop that, you know, we'll have more to report on, I think, at that stage as well. We're going to look at completing the toolkit in Q3, and then we're going to look at, you know, it being something that we iterate and improve. So encouraging people to use it and to engage as much as they can. And my details are here. So I really do encourage anyone who wants to reach out and have a conversation or send through any additional feedback to talk to me. Yeah, I'm more than willing to chat and engage and to hear any information people want to share with me. And I can see, Justina, you've got your hand up.
I do. Thanks, Olivia. I just want to say thanks to GEO Secretary, all of you for organizing this. I think it's a really important topic and needed. And thanks to everyone for contributing, because we don't always hear perspectives from initiatives in terms of what your issues are. So it's really great to hear that from a program board perspective. And I also just wanted to highlight that looking at some of the recent comments, it looks like perhaps from the program board, looking at ways to develop metrics and criteria along with the implementation plans may be helpful to help maybe set that kind of stage for developing those, so then it becomes easier for activities to uniformly report that. So just a little bit of, concluding comments from me, just looking at the comments from the Muir board. So thanks, everyone. Really good workshop.
Thank you, Justina. And a big thank you to Olivia as well for doing this work so incredibly over the last months. I mean, what you're seeing right now is really the result of many months of conversations, and it's not done yet. So there's a lot that still lies ahead in populating this toolkit. So Olivia, when you say in Q3 the toolkit will be ready, will there be still some time to have some back and forth with the activities on the content? Are you envisaging perhaps we could do this via email even to get feedback on drafts?
I'd love that. I'd love to circulate a draft and to get people's thoughts and feedbacks on what works, what's missing, clarification points, anything would be really valuable. Yeah.
Super. And we realize that a toolkit is, all 48 activities of the GEO work program are not in the same place. They don't have the same needs and requirements. So a toolkit can only answer so much, but it will be a valuable starting point. And we'd love to draw upon some of the examples and success stories or unsuccessful stories that you have encountered in your very detailed experience with the work program. So please shoot those over, like Olivia asked, to her, and we'll think up of ways to incorporate this within the toolkit. So it is really something for the GEO work program, not just any general resource mobilization toolkit that you can find online. But with that, if no one has any final thoughts, comments, the Miro board will stay open for a few more days until the end of the week. So feel free to come back to it, and also do reach out to us following up on anything that you may have heard. Olivia is always available to speak and engage. And we look forward to convening you for the next coordination workshop in a couple of months' time on capacity development. So until then, Wembo and I are here and happy to support in any shape and form. I hope to see many of you at the symposium in 2 weeks' time, not in 1 week. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.